The first sign of trouble wasn't the padlock itself, it was the silence. My ranch, nestled on the edge of Sweetwater Valley, Texas, usually pulsed with the rhythm of hooves, wind, and the occasional low grunt of my lead bison, Chief. But that July afternoon, the air was too still. No bison calls, no rustling. Just the sharp glint of metal catching sunlight from the gate that should have been opened that I had just returned from town, my truck bed weighed down with 800 pounds of feed. Chief and the rest of my 12-member herd were waiting. They hadn't eaten since sunrise. But now they stood in agitation behind the fence, pacing, sensing something off. I climbed out, confused, until I saw the industrial-grade padlock and laminated notice fluttering in the breeze. Property locked due to HOA violations. Contact Sweetwater Valley HOA for resolution. I stared in disbelief. I'd had minor run-ins with the homeowners association before, mostly about my weathered fencing or visible equipment. But this was warfare. I dialed the HOA office. No answer. Closed for the day. 20 minutes later, my wife, Rachel, pulled up, her school lanyard still around her neck, dust coating her car from the drive home from the high school. She took one look at my face and the locked gate, and her brows furrowed. "They locked you out?" "They locked us out," I said, jaw clenched. "The animals haven't eaten, and they're getting restless. We should call the sheriff." I tried. They told me to take it up with the HOA board. Rachel, always more pragmatic than I was, pulled out her phone and began recording. "Document everything. Then let's get over the fence. Those bison need food." And so we did. Me, a 6'4" former Manhattan corporate attorney turned rancher, hoisting bags of feed over the fence while my wife filmed the entire ordeal for legal records. The feed hit the ground with soft thuds, and Chief snorted in approval. The next morning, I was waiting outside the HOA office when it opened. Amber Pearson, the secretary, barely looked at me as I stepped in. "You'll need to file a formal complaint," she said, tapping away at her keyboard. "I have livestock that need daily care. Blocking my access isn't just a complaint, it's illegal." Amber paused, finally looking up. "Mr. Callahan, your property has multiple aesthetic violations. The fencing, the visible equipment, it's in the bylaws." Before I could answer, the door to the back office opened and Karen Lyle, HOA president, stepped out. Karen, always dressed like she'd just walked out of a country club catalog, smiled without warmth. "Mike," she said, "didn't expect to see you so soon. You padlocked my ranch, and your ranch has been in violation for months." I cited the grandfather clause. "My land predates the HOA. Karen's smile tightened. "That clause only exempts structural elements, not neglect. We're imposing fines and keeping the gate locked until the issues are resolved. Learn to read the rules, cowboy." Behind her, Derek Hoffman stepped into view, her business partner and HOA vice president, a man who carried himself like he once served in the military but had only ever fought battles on zoning boards. "Maybe you should consider selling, Mike," he said. "That land could go to a developer who'd actually do something useful with it." I left without another word, but my mind was spinning. I still had the minutes from the original HOA meeting, the one where Karen herself signed off on grandfather exemptions for properties like mine. This wasn't about rules or fences. It was about my land. Back home, Rachel was already researching. She found a Texas statute that made it illegal to block access to livestock. "They've overstepped," she said. "And not just morally, legally." That evening, we sat on the porch, watching Chief graze. Rachel took my hand. "They picked the wrong rancher," she said. The next day, I drove over to see Earl Jenkins, my neighbor and local legend. At 78, he'd lived in Sweetwater Valley his entire life. Over sweet tea on his porch, he confirmed my suspicions. "They've been buying up land, Mike." Karen and Derek, through their little company, Lyle Hoffman Properties. "Your ranch sits on the last undeveloped stretch with water access." "Water access?" He nodded and led me to his study, pulling out an old geological map. "Sweetwater Creek runs right under your land. You've got the main aquifer. They can't build without it." Back in town, I met with Maria Alvarez, my old law school friend turned local attorney. When I laid everything out, HOA sabotage, the aquifer, the development rumors, she leaned forward. They're setting you up, but we can take this to court. It escalated quickly. Rachel found a brochure for Sweetwater Estates, a luxury community boasting sustainable water features, sitting right on top of our ranch in the artist's renderings. Then we caught Amber and a surveyor trespassing, placing flags near the creek bed. "You're trespassing," I told her. "We're documenting violations." I recorded everything. The surveyor bailed, clearly uncomfortable. When I removed the flags, I saw the pattern. They weren't checking fences. They were mapping water flow. A few days later, Karen proposed a new ordinance at the town council meeting. Limit properties to 2 non-traditional livestock, which included bison. If passed, I whispered to Rachel, I'll have to sell most of the herd. And without the herd, the ranch isn't viable. When it was my turn to speak, I projected footage of Chief letting a butterfly land on his head. Bison are native to Texas, I told the council. They're peaceful, regulated, and my ranch is protected under a grandfather clause Karen herself signed. Then Jenkins stood up. "I've lived here over 5 decades, he said. And Mike Callahan is just doing what folks have done here for generations. What I find odd is the HOA's concern now, just as they're pushing for a development that requires water rights they don't own." He held up the Sweetwater Estates brochure. The motion to pass the ordinance was tabled. Karen stormed out, face red. But that night, all 4 tires on our truck were slashed. A note left on the windshield read, "Sell or face the consequences." That's when I called in a favor from Jacob, a friend from my FBI Academy days. He installed motion-activated cameras around the ranch. 2 nights later, we caught them. 2 men weakening a section of the fence that bordered HOA-controlled land. "They're trying to force the bison out," Jacob said. "Create a public hazard." Instead of fixing the fence, Rachel and I reinforced the surrounding sections to funnel any escape in a specific direction toward HOA land that was technically public. That week, the HOA held an open house for investors. Rachel and I watched through binoculars from the tree line. As Karen pointed at imaginary golf courses and clubhouses, I activated a sound cue we'd trained the herd to respond to. Chief moved first, followed by the rest. They walked through the sabotaged fence and into the future development site, calmly grazing as investors scattered. That I called the sheriff, calmly explained the escape, and noted that the bison were on public land. Sheriff Tom arrived minutes later. Karen screamed at him, "Arrest him." "Where's your proof this is your land?" he asked. She had none. Then an investor confronted her. "Is it true the aquifer's under his property?" Before she could answer, I stepped in. "I never sold my water rights. And according to county records, your company's permits were denied 3 times. Their jaws dropped. 2 days later, I received a court summons. The HOA had filed an emergency injunction to remove the bison. Perfect. In court, I represented myself. I showed the HOA charter with the grandfather clause, surveillance footage of fence sabotage, bank transfers from Derek to the saboteurs, testimony from Jim Thompson, the county environmental inspector, who revealed that Karen and Derek asked him to falsify water data. Finally, I showed historic maps proving the land the bison crossed was public and part of a traditional migration route. Karen lost it. "This is ridiculous. We're trying to bring progress to this backwater town." Judge Ramirez didn't flinch. Progress doesn't come at the expense of truth or the law. She ruled in my favor, rescinded fines, dismissed the injunction, and ordered an investigation into Lyle Hoffman properties. But the story didn't end there. That afternoon, we got a call from Jenkins. "They're on your property," with heavy machinery. Rachel and I sped back. We found Derek and Amber trying to dig near the aquifer. When I confronted them, Derek shoved me. That's when Chief appeared over the ridge, snorting and staring him down. Derek froze. The crew fled. Then the sheriff arrived, with investigators from the state attorney general's office in tow. Karen pulled up screaming, waving a forged permit. Tom took one look. "Fake. That's a felony." Within minutes, Karen and Derek were arrested for trespassing, forgery, conspiracy, and fraud. Sweetwater Valley changed after that. Karen and Derek were indicted. The development collapsed. The HOA was restructured, with Jenkins as interim president. I declined a board seat, choosing instead to focus on my herd. 6 months later, my ranch became a conservation site. School kids visited, learned about bison and Texas heritage. Even former HOA supporters came by, curious that I kept the old padlock in my barn, hung like a trophy. Sometimes, I told Rachel as we watched the sun rise over the herd, you don't need to fight dirty. You just need to stand your ground. And as Chief grazed nearby, the land at peace again, I smiled. Because when you lock a gate on a rancher with a legal background and 2,000 pounds of ancient muscle behind him, well, let's just say, you better read the fine print.